Hello and welcome to the Podquest of Bread. Tonight I want to talk about anarchist jurisdictions, what they are, their historical comparison, and what they might be used for. Now, earlier today, William Barr, Attorney General for the United States of America, released a list of 3 anarchist jurisdictions. These jurisdictions are places that he has chosen to fit a list of qualifications to have their federal funding and grants removed. We still don't know what grants they will be. We still don't know what federal funding will be removed. We still don't even know if it's legal, but it's happening. And to quote Syracuse.com, earlier this month, President Donald Trump instructed Attorney General William Barr to identify jurisdictions that, quote, have permitted violence and the destruction of property to persist and have refused to undertake reasonable measures to counteract these criminal activities. He goes on to say that the designation means that these cities are at risk of losing federal funding and grants. Barr was quoted as saying, "We cannot allow federal tax dollars to be wasted when the safety of the citizenry hangs in the balance. It is my hope that these cities identified by the Department of Justice today will reverse course and become serious about performing the basic function of government and start protecting their own citizens." Now, when I read this, and when I read that these cities have become anarchist jurisdictions, according to A.G. Barr and, of course, Donald Trump, the question automatically hits. The first question in my head is, are they still a part of the United States, according to A.G. Barr and the President of the United States? Because, in theory, if New York City, Portland, Oregon, and Seattle, Washington are now considered anarchist jurisdictions and not by their name, it raises a big question in my head what these cities are being viewed as. Now, it goes without saying that the protests and the riots that the Attorney General and the President of the United States are referring to, the ones in Portland, Seattle, and New York City, they did not take up a gigantic part of the city. In fact, when you look at the maps that show where these protests and riots were occurring, they were occurring in a small, isolated area within the city, on average taking up a few city blocks and not spilling out to the wide-ranging parts of the city. Of course, Donald Trump and A.G. Barr and the administration, they don't want you to know this. They don't want you to understand this because they want you to think that these riots and these protests and the looting and the lawlessness and the anarchists were all over the city, pestering and destroying and putting citizens at risk all over the city. But they weren't. In fact, they were in a small, isolated area. Many reacted with violence only after being attacked by the cops and gassed by the cops. Many didn't react with violence at all. Now, I'm going to draw some historical comparisons here first before I move into what I really think this is going to lead to for the future of these cities. And then, as A.G. Barr has said, they are looking into other cities. Now, the qualifications, let's read them. Whether a jurisdiction forbids the police force from intervening to restore order amid widespread or sustained violence or destruction. Here we see the order, the law and order that Donald Trump likes to talk about and that his administration likes to voice. And what they are, what I'm taking from this specific one, our part is whether a jurisdiction forbids the police force from intervening to restore order. Essentially, what I'm taking from this is whether a jurisdiction allows the police force to beat down its citizenry and tear gas them. That's what I take from this. It's the cities used restraint and did not do XYZ against their citizenry. Therefore, they are now on this list. It's a pretty horrifying idea. The next thing, whether a jurisdiction has withdrawn law enforcement protection from a geographical area or structure that law enforcement officers are lawfully entitled to access but have been officially prevented from accessing or permitted to access only in exceptional circumstances, except when a law enforcement officers are briefly withheld as a tactical decision intended to resolve safely and expeditiously a specific and ongoing unlawful incident posing an imminent threat to the safety of the individuals or law enforcement officers. It's a mouthful. It is a literal fucking mouthful. Within that second qualification for these cities having this anarchist jurisdiction tag put on them, he essentially says that if the city withdraws law enforcement from an area or a structure, so we're going to immediately look at the police stations that have been burned down, okay? Unless it was tactical in an order to calm the situation and bring order, is what he's saying here. It's a complete contradiction, and it leaves it up to the interpretation of the Attorney General to decide whether that was an actual tactical move or not. So if he decides at the beckoning of Donald Trump in a blue state, yeah, that wasn't a tactical decision, but the same exact thing happens in a red state, he might determine that that is a tactical decision. Remember, this all relates back to Donald Trump wanting to pull funding from blue states and blue cities. He said it himself. This has nothing to do with restoring order. This has nothing to do with anything resembling actual logical policy, and has everything to do with Donald Trump's seething hatred of Democrats, of the blue states, of the blue cities. It's funny because I think this does relate back to the fact that blue states and blue cities seemingly outperform red states and red cities constantly on almost everything. Now, this is a mouthful. They're also working very hard and making sure that they conflate anarchists and leftists with the Democratic Party. It's a continued tactical decision they make. This decision is to make the base that supports them think that people like myself, who are leftists and anarchists, are Democrats, and that Democrats support us, when the truth couldn't be further from each other. They go on to say whether a jurisdiction disempowers or defunds police departments. Again, now making it a very tough decision whether a jurisdiction is going to defund their police and start moving towards a reformed police system. This is a literal attempt to put people in a corner, to put cities, states in a corner where it's either carry out the will of the citizens to defund the police and to restructure the police, or to risk being labeled as an anarchist jurisdiction. It's dangerous. It's literally putting them in a corner in order for the President of the United States to continue to carry out his fascist regime. That's as simple as it gets. Whether a jurisdiction unreasonably refuses to accept offers of law enforcement assistance from the federal government. Again, putting them in a corner. Beat down their citizenry, tear gas them, hit them with rubber bullets, or not. If they do it, and then they accept the offers from the President of the United States, who seeks to see this happening on the streets, he did it for a photo op. If they accept that, then they are now beating down their citizenry, and they are now in the clear with the President of the United States. He's getting what he wants. But if they decide not to do that to their citizenry, now they face the chance of being called an anarchist jurisdiction and losing federal funding. This is all relating to Donald Trump being able to carry out his fascist ideas, his fascist policies. That's all this is. And they close it up. Any other related factors the Attorney General deems appropriate. Again, putting the ball directly in the Attorney General's court. He can decide if there's other things, other factors, other possible things to label a city an anarchist jurisdiction. Boogie Boogie. What if they set up a autonomous zone? Well, now he can label it an anarchist jurisdiction. This is all part of their attempts to pull out the fascist regime. Now, this actually has direct correlations. And the reason that I wanted to be able to talk about the burning of police stations, because Donald Trump held that above cities' heads for weeks. There is a direct historical correlation between this and a rise to power of another fascist regime. February 27th, 1933, the Reichstag building went up in flames. Nazis immediately claimed that this was the beginning of a communist revolution. Ironically, Donald Trump also claimed that the burning of a police station in Minneapolis was the start of a radical anarchist agitators leftist revolution, an attack on freedom. See, what's believed to have happened when the Reichstag building went up in flames was it's believed that the Nazis actually set that fire. It's widely believed that the Nazis are the ones that actually set that fire in order to progress their political agenda. It's also believed in some circles that some of the police stations and some of the buildings that have been burned to the ground were actually started by outside agitators who fled behind police lines during all of the protests that have sparked in 2020. Back when buildings were being burnt and being looted, it's widely believed, and Minneapolis is in fact pressing charges against someone for this, that it was white nationalists. It was cop sympathizers doing this. There's a direct correlation. The Nazis burned the Reichstag building to push forward their agenda. And, well, you have the radical alt-right burning buildings in order to push forth their agenda, a fascist agenda, an agenda that alters the future of this country, an agenda that changes what this country looks like. That isn't the only direct correlation. There are so many things that occurred within the Nazi rise to power that can be directly correlated to what's happening right now. The Nazi Party and their anti-Semitic legislation and propaganda, they called people non-Aryans. They declared those non-Aryans to be separate from German society. They declared those non-Aryans to be enemies of the state. Well, Donald Trump, he's declaring anarchists and leftists to be non-American, not patriots. Anti-fascists are terrorists. He's doing this to label these people in order to exclude them from American society. That's his goal. That's his attempt. Because when those people then are detained and prosecuted in private courts, similar to how the Nazis did, the United States and the patriotic Americans don't mind it. Wow, they're defending us against our enemies, domestic terrorists. Doesn't matter to them because, hoorah, America. Yeah, that is what we're staring at right now. So I have one thing to say to everybody that was freaking out when we started saying that the president and his regime are very Nazi-like. When we started directly comparing them to the Nazi Party, when we just started comparing his rise to power and the things he's doing to the rise of the Nazis and Adolf Hitler, to all those people that called us crazy, that told us to calm down, told us to stay silent, that we don't know what we're talking about, we're waiting on our apology. Because he's checked off the 14 characteristics and 10 traits of fascism. And now he is following the literal steps in a rise to power by the Nazis. Soon he will have his third appointed pick on the Supreme Court, someone who closely marches to the sound of his drum, someone who is willing to put forth the policy he needs. This is all a part of the gradual degradation of the democracy that is the United States of America, the gradual degradation of the republic, and the turn and the handing of power from the people to Donald Trump. This is fascism. This is not supposed to happen here. There's no way this was supposed to be able to happen, which means that our system that had checks and balances that was designed to prevent this from happening is fundamentally broken and needs to be repaired. But sadly, to repair it, it needs to be torn down in order to be rebuilt. So that way we never have the opportunity for fascism to take root in this country and for a dictator to set up his lifelong rule. Stay beautiful, humans.